The U.S. is stopping oil tankers at sea. And no, this is not a movie. This is Venezuela. Yes, really, this is happening. In the past few days, the United States has seized Venezuelan oil tankers and ordered what President Trump called a total and complete blockade of sanctioned oil ships going in and out of Venezuela. Oil prices have jumped. Tankers are frozen in place. And one company somehow walked away untouched, is still trading and buying Venezuelan oil. Let's talk about what's happening, how we got here, and why the U.S. says this is all actually legal. Right now, Venezuela's oil shipping is basically paralyzed. After the U.S. seized a tanker accused of moving sanctioned oil, ships started doing the maritime equivalent of nope, idling in ports or turning around mid-ocean. The U.S. has warned that there will be more seizures, and American naval forces are now heavily positioned in the Caribbean. But here's the twist. Chevron is still shipping oil like it's a normal Tuesday. Because Chevron operates under a special U.S. license, it's legally exempt from the sanctions strangling everyone else. So while Venezuela's shadow fleet stalls, Chevron sails on. Which raises the obvious question. How did we end up with U.S. warships, the Coast Guard, oil seizures, and one American company getting a hall pass? This goes back years. The U.S. has sanctioned Venezuela heavily since 2019, accusing President Maduro of corruption, drug trafficking, and using oil money to prop up his regime. Since oil makes up over 90% of Venezuela's export income, sanctions hit like a sledgehammer. To survive, Venezuela has turned to shadow tankers, secret ship-to-ship transfers, and sales to countries like China and Cuba. That worked until now. Last week's tanker seizure and this week's blockade order mark a major escalation, not just financial pressure, but physical enforcement at sea. Which brings us to the legal part. Because stopping ships sounds a lot like an act of war, unless the paperwork says otherwise. Under U.S. law, the president has broad authority to enforce sanctions through national emergency powers, Treasury Department sanctions, and maritime interdictions of already sanctioned vessels. In plain English, if a ship is already blacklisted, the U.S. claims it can stop it, seize it, and keep it. International law is a little bit trickier. A full naval blockade can be considered an act of war unless it's narrowly targeted at sanctioned ships and framed as law enforcement, not warfare. This is a big reason why the Coast Guard is involved in these actions. That's why the U.S. keeps stressing that this isn't a blanket blockade and why Chevron is explicitly excluded. So this isn't just about Venezuela. It's about whether the U.S. can enforce sanctions with ships instead of spreadsheets, choke off oil without firing a shot, and redraw the rules of economic warfare in real time. Oil tankers are frozen. Markets are watching. And Venezuela just learned that sanctions don't always stop at paperwork. Sometimes they come with ships, they come with men, they come with helicopters, and they seize your oil tankers.